Honestly, everyone's kind of getting used to Iowa State beating Iowa in the big sports like football and basketball. But the way Iowa State broke Iowa on the mats this last weekend in wrestling, the tides are officially changing.
You are Locked On Cyclones, your daily podcast on the Iowa State Cyclones, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome into Locked On Cyclones, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, now the #1 sports podcast network. I'm your host, Nick Marovets. Thank you for making this your first watch or listen of the day. I appreciate it more than you know. Be sure to hit subscribe down below so we can prove once and for all that it is, in fact, a Cyclone state. And that's exactly where we're going to start today, is Iowa State's win over Iowa in wrestling. And that really, to me, feels like a nail in the coffin as far as, is it a Cyclone state or not? That was a huge win for the wrestling team. We're going to start there, break that down. Then in the second segment, we're going to go basketball. Both teams, men and women, thriving right now. So we're going to break down kind of where the teams have been, where they're going, what they're ranked now. Obviously, super exciting conversation there. Then to round out today's show, I found some interesting stats around the Iowa State defense in football. So kind of a mixed bag when it comes to sports today. Stick around for some kind of weird in-depth analysis on Iowa State's defense ahead of their bowl game and really the outlook for next season. Can't wait to dive into all that more. But first, today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Ladies and gentlemen, I am so beyond excited to get to talk about the fact that Iowa State defeated Iowa in wrestling 20-14 for the first time in 21 years. For context, I don't even know if I was walking. I probably was. I feel like 3-year-olds can walk at a pretty solid rate. Myself, I don't know, but I was 3 the last time Iowa State defeated Iowa in a wrestling duel. Tom Brands, head coach at Iowa, 19-0 against Iowa State. Obviously, he was not too thrilled about the loss based on the way he took the presser. But man, I've got pages of notes here, and they're emphatic notes. Like this was so much fun to watch. If you haven't seen it, I highly suggest you find a way to go back and watch it. I know wrestling isn't watched by a ton of people. I wrestled in high school, so obviously this one is just something that was like, I enjoy wrestling. And man, like, even if you don't know exactly what's going on, the noise in Hilton, which that just goes to show what Cyclone fans are made of too. Can we just pause and appreciate that for a second? The fact that the weather was what it was a Thanksgiving weekend and that many people showed up to the point where I could tell over the TV just how loud it was in Hilton. Hilton Magic isn't just reserved for basketball. That was electric. That was fun. And obviously the stakes, it's the CyHawk, all of that goes into it. I am completely aware that that's not your average wrestling meet. It was a little bit tuned up, but boy, was that a fun one to get to witness. The way that wrestling kind of works, for those of you who aren't super aware here, I'm going to lay out a few key details before we dive into some of the matches. The coaches decide where the wrestling starts, which weight class. There are 10 matches in a duel, and Iowa State really wanted to start at heavyweight. Won the toss, decided they were going to start with Yonger, which I think was the right play, just the way that the duel played out. Very interesting, different from when I was in high school. At least it was like random. Generally in the tournament setting, in the duels, I guess I don't know. I never coached, but from my knowledge, it was random. So it's very interesting to see that wrinkle. And the other thing that we're going to bring up is the challenge brick, okay? That will come into effect very much big time in the MJ 174 match. Look, all I've got to say is each coach only gets one challenge, and if the challenge is successful, they get the brick back. It's not a flag like in football; it's a brick, which I feel like is just perfect. It really embodies wrestling. But they get that brick back, and we'll get back to the brick. But each coach only gets one challenge per duel, unless they're successful. Then they get it back. Nonetheless, I'm not going to walk you through every single thing I saw in this duel. Big win for Bastida, or I always want to call him Bastida. Bastida, Yonger showed up big time, obviously. A lot of Iowa fans upset with how big he was or how old he is. Look, I think it really just comes down to the fact that he's better than an Iowa wrestler right now. And that's just part of it. That was a fun match to start off for Iowa State. At 125, I honestly thought that one was really, really close. It just kind of came down to a scramble. And that's what makes wrestling so electric to watch. But it really came down to the end. I thought in the beginning, Poland was better. Steve-O, I thought, was honestly better. And his stand-up was really fast. It was really good. 133 was a fun one. Frost, Ayala, I mean, tons of scoring in the third period. I've got 2 takedowns from Frost here on the upset. That one was big. Couple quick singles is what I've got written down here. The electric match, huge win by Frost. That one I think helped propel. There's a couple swing matches. That was a swing match that Iowa State needed to get. At 141, this one was special. I'm sorry, these notes are starting to get a little bit crazy because I started to get so just really fired up here. This one ended up being a major 15-2. That was a big match as well. 149, Pinheiro. Okay, this was the first overtime match of the duel. I'm not really sure why we ended up throwing Pinheiro in neutral in the second half of tiebreakers there, or if you want to kind of look at it as the third overtime. I felt like there wasn't really a whole lot of offense going that match, and I would have probably taken my chances with him on the mat, but that's just me. Obviously, I'm not Dresser, and we'll get to Dresser here in a second. I'm kind of trying to quick recap this, and I understand this is not a perfect recap, but we're trying to squeeze this in. At 157, arguably my favorite match of the meet, of the duel, I suppose. Scramble Fest. And it really came down to when Jordan Williams stopped wrestling. And I felt like that was kind of the embodiment of this duel. Not entirely, obviously. I'm not saying every Iowa wrestler quit, but Jordan, I mean, I've never, ever seen at the college level, and I haven't watched a ton, but at the college level especially, I've never seen someone just stop wrestling. And that happened. And that was a huge, I mean, my jaw literally dropped. That's what I have written down here. A couple of massive takedowns from Zerban there. That was a really fun one. At 165, this was really the area where I thought Iowa kind of showed their strength a little bit. It's not how the whole team is anymore. Connor Uten tore his ACL last season in this duel, survived the match for now, potentially sprained ankle, but did get tech fold. So that one wasn't great. I'm not going to lie. But MJ Gaitan showed up in the following match, and maybe one of my favorite matches I've ever seen. Maybe one of the loudest environments that Hilton has seen. The fact how he went about winning this was just so, and yeah, it was interesting the way that they went to overtime. I thought honestly that we could have gotten a little bit more from MJ. But nonetheless, this is where the challenge brick comes back in, and we can talk about Dresser again, because this match between Gaitan and Kennedy, Gaitan, I'm so sorry, but ends up going to overtime. Nothing really happens in overtime. In sudden victory, goes to tiebreakers, and in between the second and the third tiebreaker, their Dresser throws the challenge brick. And this is really the masterpiece of what Dresser is capable of doing. Yes, he threw it for a locked hands. I went back and watched it. I think that there was an area about 1 to 2 seconds into that first tiebreaker where Kennedy did lock his hands. That was my opinion. Okay. Now, doesn't really matter because it ended up being that Dresser threw the brick too late. And the refs were like, yeah, we're not going to even allow you to basically challenge this. But in throwing the brick, whether or not they won the locked hands argument, it gave MJ a chance to get some breath. Now, to Dresser's point, he said the postgame, like both guys were extremely gassed. Both of them got break. Like that is true. It's not like Kennedy's out there running sprints while MJ is resting. That's not how that works. But I genuinely think that rest was the reason that MJ was able to hold Kennedy down. The rest, it was like 13 or 14 seconds. I don't remember if he held it to the end of the match because my eyes were just, they're blurry from tears of joy. It was unbelievable. That was a huge win for Iowa State in this duel just because of the way that 65, 74, and I would even argue 84 were laid out in this duel. Then at 84, Dean showed some unbelievable heart. Quite honestly, unreal defensive wrestling. Just, I mean, out of his mind. And if that's, I need to watch more Dean, to be completely honest. Isaac Dean, I will watch you more after this because it was a clinic. And if that's normal, which they did bring up on the broadcast, like that's kind of his history. I don't know how you couldn't love it. That was so fun to watch. I think probably 6 times in that match. I thought, yeah, he's cooked. And he somehow found a way out of it. So shout out to Isaac Dean. Didn't beat Ferrari. All right. Just didn't have enough offense going in that one. And it came down to a stall call. But really, really, really solid technique defensively there. And then Rocky Elam closing it out for Iowa State in a have-to-win-it match. Look, we're going to go a little over on time. And I know that was it's just a super fast rerun of that. If you want to see more wrestling, more kind of breakdowns, let me know in the comments below because I love watching wrestling. That was such a huge win for this program. This was a huge win for Dresser, for a lot of these guys in the lineup. Electric. And to get started this, with the tough kind of stretch of the season, beating a great Iowa team. And I will give Iowa their flowers. Like, they are a good wrestling program still. Like, and it's obvious, like, I'm not going to argue, like, oh, now Iowa State's like the better wrestling program. I will get too many comments. Like, when was the last, how old were you when, that was their 3rd win since 1987, Iowa State's. It's pretty one-sided. I will give Iowa their credit. They're a very good wrestling program, and they have been for a long time. But that was an enormous win for Iowa State. And for the argument of the CyHawk rivalry this season, I believe the count right now is 11-2, and I can't even wait to see what the basketball side of that looks like. Speaking of basketball, we are in great territory. Both teams are looking unbelievable right now. We're going to break that down coming up right here after this. But first, we're going to talk about our friends over at Omaha Steaks. The holidays always feel a little easier when you already know the perfect gift, and Omaha Steaks makes it almost too simple. Whether you're treating yourself this season or sending something memorable to family and friends, Omaha Steaks delivers handcrafted perfection right to your door. And this week is the best time to jump in because their cyber sale is here and the deals are huge. The quality is exactly what you'd hope for. Incredibly tender steaks, rich flavor, and the meals that make hosting or weeknights cooking easier. But the variety is also super underrated. Steaks, burgers, comfort meals, sides, desserts, and one of those gifts that truly fits everyone. Save big on unforgettable gifts with Omaha Steaks. Visit omahasteaks.com for 50% off site-wide and save an extra 20% off select favorites during their cyber sale. And for an additional $35 off, use promo code COLLEGE at checkout. That's omahasteaks.com, promo code COLLEGE. Terms apply. See site for details. We did just finish talking about wrestling, but we need to pivot to another winter sport and really encapsulate what's going on in Iowa State basketball right now, because we're honestly in a very special time, and we're going to talk about here at Locked On Cyclones, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Now, the #1 sports podcast network. Both men and women are killing it on the basketball court right now. We will get to the men in a second, but we kind of talked about them a considerable amount with their players era, the whole deal with where they're going to make money, top 4, yada, 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 the big wins. We'll come back to that, trust me, because they're ranked in a very special spot. But Iowa State women with a big win over Indiana in the Blue Heron division of the Coconut Hoops championship match, 106-95. And this one made the rounds on basically Sports Nation, if you will. Anyone who paid attention to sports, or essentially anybody who watched ESPN or SportsCenter, heard about this one because Audi Crooks, yet again, proving she's very good at basketball. 47 points. 47 points in 33 minutes for Miss Crooks, number 55, out of the 106 that Iowa State scored. That isn't quite 50%, but it's dang close. 47 out of 106. What is that? Right around probably 40% is my guess, just without doing the math. Great victory for Iowa State. And after watching this game, the biggest takeaway that I grabbed is I think that Jada Williams, in a way, unlocked this team. We'll wait to see, I think, until they play a few more opponents, open up Big 12 play a little bit. But the way Jada Williams just goes about this game, when it was announced that she was going to transfer, when she kind of announced her commitment to Iowa State from Arizona, I remember watching her tape and being like, wow, that's a good player. Iowa State got a good one in Jada Williams. And she ended up with 23 points in this one, second leading scorer. It is kind of crazy the way that the scoring essentially broke down in this particular game against Indiana. Audi Crooks with 47, Jada Williams with 23. Addie Brown had 17. Nobody else in double digits. Three other players did score. Reese Beatty had 8, Kenzie Hare had 9, and Lily Tolele had 2. Just one of one on the night. So very much kind of like a big three, if you will, a couple other players. Very interesting in that regard. But the way Jada Williams is aggressive, and then you pair that with Audi Crooks and how dominant she is on the inside, multiple possessions where ball gets into Audi Crooks. She's one-on-one. It's where the ball should go. I mean, we saw against Valpo. I think it was 43 points against Valparaiso. That is like, if it's one-on-one, just keep giving it to her. She's going to keep scoring. And they send the ball in. And then, obviously, Indiana, as a response, crashes down. And when you send a bunch of players to the ball, that basically opens up everybody else. And Audi Crooks was able to basically have the court vision to know, yeah, we're going to throw that right back out. In from Jada Williams to Audi Crooks, right back out. Jada Williams drains a 3. That's not necessarily uncommon. Jada Williams from beyond the arc went 2 of 4 in this game. And Addie Brown did as well. Kenzie Hare hit both of her 3s. So, look, this team, this women's team, ranked top 10, number 10, could be a problem this year. Could be maybe one of the best Iowa State women's basketball teams we've seen. And obviously, I think Audi Crooks will continue to do great things. This is an extremely exciting women's team. I know women's basketball is like kind of making a comeback, if you will, just like definitely rising up in the ranks of what people are watching. This team is very much worth watching. This is a very star-studded, highly capable team. I think they're going to make a lot of noise in the Big 12. When it comes to the men, we'll pivot just because we have a few minutes here. The men were ranked top 10 after their victories in the Players Era tournament. I would argue 10 is maybe still a little bit too low. But I believe right now they only have one quad 1 win, and it's St. John's. We'll see how that shakes out. But I guess I'm okay with that. I think Iowa State probably deserved to not have to play Syracuse in that final round. But I was actually just talking with some other Iowa State fans today about this team. And there are a couple takeaways that I have just from watching this team so far. And I've said a few of them. For one, this team is fun to watch. They're good, yes, but they're also really fun. Like they're high flying, they're fast. They have all the components, it feels like to me, to not only be successful this season, but to be a fun watch, right? Like even if we lose, I will enjoy watching this team, which is as a viewer, as a fan, that's a fun thing, right? Like that's really cool. The other thing though is, yes, we have to see what this team can do against, like, they'll play Purdue on the 6th this weekend. That one, make sure your TV is turned to the channel where I think it's on CBS. Like that one, you need to watch. And then they'll play Iowa, which I guess how big of a competition is Iowa. But nonetheless, we'll see as they get into these bigger games. But right now, based on like what I saw in the Players Era, the way I'm describing it, and this may be incorrect, you may not disagree or you may not agree with me, is that the guys returning from last season, like Jefferson, like I would argue even Momcilovic to a degree, definitely Lipsy, they have a presence on the floor that is almost that of like some sort of like wise figure. I don't know exactly what you would want to title that, but that person who knows what's going on, they've seen a lot of ball, and they're able to direct the team in a special way. Not saying that nobody else on the floor is capable of doing that, but that's just the vibe that I get. And then you have, in conjunction with those types of players, you have guys like Dominic Nelson, Killian Torre. I would argue Momcilovic kind of goes both ways, honestly. Bateman, like the guys that just, even Buchanan, sprint up and down the floor, almost out of control. Like it feels like, you know, one of those glass, like plasma, like they're like children's museum toys or whatever. They're like the plasma ball. When you touch the glass, the plasma goes to your finger. It's like everyone is this plasma. And then the guys like Jefferson and Tame and Lipsy are the glass that's containing them. And somehow this dynamic is allowing them to be on a different level, essentially. And so that's just the way that I see it. I'm curious if you agree, if you disagree. That's just my personal opinion. That really doesn't hurt my feelings if you think I'm wrong. It's just how I see it. And I think that they're going to go a long ways when you get into actual in-depth analysis, like Milan shooting ridiculous from beyond the arc. And just in general, his shot production has gone up with the number of shots he's taken, in my opinion. You look at what Lipsey's able to do as a field general and creating those Taylor Lipsey plays when he comes back. Jefferson on the inside and as a passer. Blake Buchanan, I feel like, is a step in the right direction in the on the inside as well. Like, these guys have all the talent. I think they're definitely top 10. I think you could probably make the argument for a little bit more. They just haven't played that competition. Purdue will be a great opportunity for them to prove what they're capable of this season. And I think they're going, we'll go over that probably later this week. But as of right now, I really think that they're very capable of beating that Purdue team. I do. I think that they are capable of beating that team. Will they need the ball to bounce their way a few times? Maybe. We'll talk about it later this week, so be sure to subscribe and come back then. But for now, I think they're very capable of it. Don't go anywhere, though, because we aren't done yet. We still have to break down football. I found some very interesting stats when I dove into what this season has looked like for Iowa State, and John Haycock might just be a genius. But first, we're going to talk about our friends over at Game Time. The World Cup is coming back to North America for the first time since 1994. And with 48 teams for the first time ever, it's going to be massive. But let's be honest, getting tickets is usually the hard part. That's why the Game Time app is clutch, finally giving fans a real advantage when it comes to snagging seats. With Game Time, you can track price drops in real time, get alerts when great seats open, and buy tickets the moment they hit the app. It puts the power back in your hands and makes going to the World Cup realistic instead of impossible. You pull up the app, the layout makes it so simple. And my favorite feature by far is the fact that you can see what the view from your seat is before you buy it. All right. I don't do so hot with the maps, visualizing. Just let me know exactly what it looks like. Game Time makes that very, very possible. Take the guesswork out of buying World Cup tickets and every match, concert, or event with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, download the app, make an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download Game Time today. We've done wrestling, interestingly enough. We've done basketball. And now we're on to football here at Locked On Cyclones, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I have to say, I did not see this coming when I was breaking down some stuff for today's show. It wasn't really initially on my bingo card. I was just browsing stats, as I feel like a lot of Iowa State fans do, looking at how the season went. And I found something pretty interesting because the reason this came up was I was shocked at how well Iowa State's defense played. Really, honestly, all season, just when you consider what they've been through, and we brought this up this week already. But after the TCU game, that was the game where I thought we were probably going to get, or Iowa State was probably going to get exposed. It was probably going to be pretty ugly. And that wasn't the case. Iowa State absolutely showed out and did what they had to do. They found a way in that one, which was remarkable. And I honestly, that game made me kind of want to take back a lot of my comments that I had made about John Haycock and this defense. And there were so many comments about just online, just the general Iowa State fan discourse was, this scheme doesn't work. This scheme, we got to change something. The defense is extremely kind of hard to really break down because it's hard to know exactly what the plan is because they're reacting, right? On offense, it's pretty easy to tell what the plan is with the exception of like option routes generally for wide receivers and scrambles, I would say. I guess you could make the argument that it's not planned. It's relatively reactive. But for the most part, offense is pretty cut and dry, right? The defense's job is literally just to react. The offense has a plan every single play as far as what everyone's going to be doing. So defense makes it a little harder to break down. And I did do it a couple times this season. I feel like I said things that mattered. But when you look at the season as a whole and how the stats round out, the numbers are interesting. Remember last season, how good Iowa State's pass defense was? First in the Big 12. They allowed 165 yards passing per game. They were first in the Big 12. If you remember, that was kind of the big talking point going into really the Arizona State game. I personally was of the belief that if they could just effectively shut down Cam Scadaboo, which proved to be a ridiculously tall task, they would be okay because it was unlikely that Arizona State was going to be able to get anything going through the air. Both of those statements kind of ended up being false in a way. Like one just didn't happen and one was literally not true. It was an ugly game. I remember it very well. I was there. But that was the point of emphasis because that's what Iowa State really hung their hat on last season. Rushing, Iowa State allowed 188 yards per game, which was 15th in the Big 12. Second to last. Not ideal. So then I took a look at this season's stats, and interestingly enough, Iowa State allowed 218 yards per game over the last 12 games. Obviously, they're now 8-4. They allowed 218 yards through the air, which was 10th best in the Big 12. And I am doing these in the Big 12 just because it's really not worth bringing up the other conferences when you're like ranking in the 60s and 70s. It's just a little easier. The numbers are the same. It's just ranking against a different set of criteria. So 218 yards per game, 10th in the Big 12. That's an extra basically 50 yards per game because 40 would be 05, 50 yards would be 15, roughly about an extra 50 yards per game. And then on the ground, Iowa State actually gave up 138 yards per game. So they were 6th in the Big 12 based on the 188 from last season. That's basically 50 yards per game less, which means that instead of being first in passing and last in running, they kind of squeezed the two together and met in the middle. And so when I saw those stats, I immediately was like, how's this even possible? This just feels like wrong. So then I looked at the number of touchdowns that Iowa State gave up. They gave up 18 through the air last season, 19 on the ground. This season, 14 through the air, 14 on the ground. So both were less this season. They ended up coming in 7th as far as passing touchdowns allowed and 4th as far as rushing touchdowns allowed. Last season, 6th and 11th in those respective categories. So lower in both. What I'm saying here is somehow this program, this defensive scheme, it still works. Now, everyone wants to say that like this season there was like some fall off because they weren't the number one best passing defense ever. They allowed 20.2 points per game this season, 5th in the Big 12. Last season, they allowed 22.9 points per game, which was also 5th in the Big 12. 2.7 points difference per game, basically a field goal. I don't know if it's turnovers coming at basically the best possible time for Iowa State because we did have a fair number of those this season, or if it just comes, I don't even know. You could probably lay this out a million different ways. The way that I look at it is, for those of you who are not a fan of the way that John Haycock ran last year's defense, which I imagine wasn't very many of you because of how good the passing defense was, but I could see where some would not like it because of it was very clearly one-sided, like just stop the pass, let them run type of basically defensive with hindsight. Like that was kind of the mentality, and it's not entirely that cut and dry, but I could see where there'd be some that didn't love that. If you weren't in the I don't like it last year, you can't be in the I don't like it this year. That's the way I see it. You have to stick with what you felt last season because the numbers are almost the same. And the end result is actually better. They allowed a field goal less, essentially, per game this season. Just worth thinking about. I could not believe those numbers. I trust John Haycock more than I probably should after the way those last 3 games went for Iowa State in the regular season. We'll see how the bowl game goes, but it wasn't a flash in a pan. It wasn't a whole TCU to 17 points and a ridiculous number. Like it wasn't just TCU. It wasn't just Kansas. It wasn't just Oklahoma State. And honestly, when you look through their entire season, they play very well consistently. 41 points to BYU is like the outlier. 38 to Cincinnati was a weird one. But other than that, Iowa State's defense was, I think, much better than what people gave them credit for. I don't think we were fair to this defense this season, especially when you consider how hurt they were. We just had that whole conversation, and the whole time I didn't even mention, well, I might have at the very beginning, but they were hurt beyond what I think most teams would have even been able to send out on the field. It was remarkable the way that Iowa State and John Haycock was able to maneuver this defense to keep Iowa State in games, because I would argue they were in every game they lost. I absolutely would. Second half of Cincinnati was remarkable. I believe it was the second half against Colorado. The first half against BYU was just insane. Arizona State, kind of the wheels fell off at the end there, and then they won the last 3. So, like, you can't give enough credit to this defense. And I'm not going to right now say that this defensive scheme doesn't work, because by the numbers, it does. And they got better with basically, like, the linebackers all came back, and I can't tell you how important it was. And we made that point in the offseason, and the talent and the depth and whatever. But in the secondary, and you still held them to 218 passing. So if the defense in the passing game was as good as it could have been first in passing and 6th in rushing in the Big 12, very possible. I know that's a hypothetical, but that's what this scheme gives you. There's potential for that. Just keep that in mind. Just keep that in mind. When John Haycock has his guys on the field next season, if they stay healthy, look out. They could be one of the best teams in not only the Big 12, but in college football, just because of the scheme. I could not believe these numbers. Let me know what you think in the comments below. We're at Nick_Marv, about the wrestling duel, about where the basketball teams are at, or the defensive scheme. Do you like it? Do you hate it? I'm interested to see what you think. Be sure to hit subscribe. It's completely free. Helps us prove that it is, in fact, a Cyclone state. That being said, until next time, Cyclone fans, sayonara.